one.
What's good, my people? It's your boy Godfrey coming at you from P4P Boxing Show, and we are proudly sponsored by Bravose. And today we're here to discuss not just the fight of the year, but the fight of the decade. And some may even argue it might be the fight of the century, but whatever you want to call it, whatever your opinion, it's all for the history books. Errol Spence versus Terence Crawford. Man, I still can't believe this fight is happening. I've been wanting them to fight for years, but it's on. The fight is on. And more or less the question really comes down to how competitive is the fight. The public are calling it a 50-50 fight, and I think rightly so. And I think for me, I think it's a 50-50 fight. It's probably, if not the most genuine 50-50 fight out there at the minute. There's a lot of different assets that both have that they bring to the table, but I think one of the main reasons why it would be such a close fight is because both fighters have achieved so much in their careers, and I think the way they match up stylistically is also another thing. But if we start with Errol Spence himself, he's had 28 wins and 22 coming by way of knockouts. So look, it's no secret, Errol Spence means serious business. He's the fighter that tends to go in there and just be just a train. He just goes through his opponents. In his amateur days as well, actually, he had an impressive career. I believe he had 135 wins and only 12 losses. He also secured the national golden gloves as well. I believe he won the national championships between 2009 and 2011. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. So look, it's no secret that Errol Spence is up there, and he's beyond elite. He also, I believe, went into the Olympics actually. So he is an Olympian, but I believe he fell up short in the quarterfinals, which cost him to get at least a bronze. But look, Errol Spence, if we're talking about a fighter that is up there, we have to say it's him. And if we moved over to Terence Crawford, look, he's currently as well up there along with Errol Spence at the moment. His professional record currently stands at 39 wins with a massive 30 knockouts. Also holds a WBO world title, 1 out of the 4 belts. Errol Spence holds 3 out of the 4 belts at the moment. Terence Crawford also won 3 different amateur tournaments as well. I believe in 2006 he won the national championships, gold and blue, I believe. Won gold in all 3 amateur tournaments. And he also fell up short as well in the 2008. Well, prior to the 2008 Olympics, he wasn't able to go because he lost a fight which would have had him qualify for the Olympics, but unfortunately he didn't. But saying that, he's already fulfilled his undisputed goals. He became undisputed in the lightweight division. So this is going to be a second time round if he does win tonight against Errol Spence. So imagine if he does become the undisputed champion tonight, he's going to be the only boxer to become a 2-time undisputed champion. And he's close. He's close. There's a couple hours left to fight the main man, Errol Spence, for the undisputed championship. And who knows? Who knows? Is it his dream to become 2-time the only man to do it? What an achievement that would be if he goes ahead and win the fight tonight. But look, the obvious is they are both elite. If we had to ask a question as well, how good are the fighters? We have to say like they are beyond elite. And I think even their achievements is a testament of their greatness in boxing. Ultimately, I think Terence Crawford and Errol Spence, I think those two fighters, whoever wins tonight, has to be the number one pound for pound for me, in my opinion, anyway. But currently saying that, I think both fighters have prepared very well for this fight, according to Bomac and Derek James. Derek James, who trains Errol Spence, he did mention, I believe, in one of his videos that Spence had been, pushing himself even more in his training camps, going for more rounds, pushing himself a little bit more. So you can imagine the pressure on these fighters is huge, and Terence Crawford himself as well. He's gone ahead and trained the exact same way he does with all of his other opponents, and I understand that. Obviously, why break a chain if it's not broken? So, not that he's not taking Errol Spence seriously. Of course he is. He always has a very good camp with Bomac. So, look, both fighters are going to come. Both are going to be ready. I watched the weigh-in yesterday, and they both looked in ridiculous tip-top shape. So, look, it's going to be a fight that both fighters are definitely going to be ready. But if we jump over to the strengths and weaknesses, I think it's best to get to the heart of the matter. And for me, if we're going to see, which fighter can neutralize, the tools of whoever, it's going to be a tricky one. Honestly, I think, starting with Errol Spence himself, if there's a fighter that currently takes boxing fundamentals in a literal sense, it has to be Errol Spence. I think for me, that guy is all about sticking to the book. And when it comes to boxing fundamentals, he is, just imagine if you can have a picture in your mind and you had a group of boxers, a group of beginners that was just about to start boxing. If there's a boxer that you want the beginners to imitate and learn from, it has to be Errol Spence. He is that guy that you would have in a boxing gym, just wanting the beginners to follow him, because he has his fundamentals so he's so sound overall when it comes to the basics. It's beyond me. So I think every move he makes is fundamentally sound, and you have to admit he's probably the true, or if not the master of the basics. But we'll dive into the intricacies of his elements and discover why he is such a problem. So for me, if I had to point at a particular element where I think he's the strongest at, it has to be his jab. I think Errol Spence's best tool is his jab for me. You can't take that away from him. Honestly, I think the way he dictates the fight with his jab is beyond me. For me, if not, Errol Spence probably has the best jab in boxing, full stop. That jab doesn't stop working. That jab is fully charged. It's AAA battery, just always filled out right to the top. I've never seen him throw a lazy jab. And I think that's going to be a key thing for Errol Spence. He has to keep that going. He's also a very good body attacker as well. A lot of fighters nowadays are just headhunters. But for me, Errol Spence, goes to the body really well. And it opens up upstairs, doesn't it, if you do end up going to the body. And also, it's no secret, according to his opponents, that his power is also a massive one. He has a thumping power. He tends to break his opponents down. So I can see that being a factor in this fight. And I want to actually, I'm curious to see how Terence Crawford is going to react to that thumping power, in my opinion. And also, he is a dictator. I think Spence dictates every fight that he's been at. So for me, Spence has a lot of strengths coming into this fight, but he is also facing, if not one of the best that he's ever fought. But overall, as I mentioned, he is just so fundamentally sound. But as good as Spence is, there's also weaknesses. Every fighter has its weakness, and for me, I think Errol Spence's weakness, I don't know if you want to call it a weakness, but he fights one way. I've not seen him change his style. Like, I know how he's going to approach this fight. I know how he's going to start the fight. He's a train. He looks to bulldoze his opponents. And can that be a weakness? I think it can against Terence Crawford. You know, for someone like Terence who can fight in so many different styles and different ways, for Errol just to have that tool that does work against many of his other opponents that he has fought in the past, he's got one style. He may have another style that we've never seen before, but he hasn't taken that tool out of his toolbox as of yet. So you have to wait and see. And I think secondly as well, I think the other thing that I've never seen him do is I haven't seen him fight on the back foot as frequent in his past fights. I don't think he's ever been forced to be pushed back. So I'm curious to see how this fight will go if he is going to be forced back on his back foot. So that's a weakness that I see. I think, you know, as I mentioned, he is so good fundamentally, but at the same time, he's got one style. So will that cost him? Well, we have to wait and see. But if we move over to Terence Crawford, strength, look, Terence Crawford is that type of fighter that he's artistic, you know, he's that fighter that brings up these special, miraculous moments. He is that fighter that I think has it all. I think he has everything, you know. I think he fights in a way that just gets the fans standing up and just sing praise at him, because he is such a good fighter overall that has so many different tools in his toolbox. You know, he can change from orthodox to southpaw. His ability to adapt as well is impressive. To be able to just change styles is one thing that, you know, is definitely worth noting for sure. And as well, he's a fantastic counter puncher as well. I think probably, if not probably, one of the best counter punches in boxing for me. And I think he's also the best aggressive back foot fight I've ever seen. Not even over exaggerated at all. I think for someone to be able to fight as good as he does on his front foot and to be able to do that on his back foot is so impressive. You know, to be able to counter punch and be just as strong as he is on the front foot is certainly impressive. But as I mentioned earlier, with Errol, the same I'm going to mention with Crawford, he also has a weakness. And if I had to pinpoint a particular weakness in Terence Crawford, he's a slow starter for me. I think he starts very slow. And I understand, I think when you have so many tools in your toolbox, you want to see which tool works out, and you tend to take different tools and see whether if those work, you know. But at the same time, can he start slow against Errol Spence? Can he afford to start slow? Well, I don't think he can, honestly, and that's going to be a massive factor for me, I think. Whether if he's going to start slow or not, who knows? We have to wait and see. And secondly, I think Terence Crawford's second weakness that I have seen as well is that he's a risk taker. You know, he takes risks and he's quite ambitious. But I think this is going to be a weakness. It is a weakness because if he overextends a counter hook or whatever he does, you know, Spence may try to capitalize on that because he's so ambitious in throwing these power punches at times and commits himself quite often into getting into certain positions to get a good, you know, attack on his opponents. And I understand why he does it. It's to get in a position where he can knock out his opponents or into a better attacking position. But he has to be very, very careful. And we have to see whether it's going to be detrimental. We have to wait and see. So it all comes down to who's got the easiest job to neutralize, you know, the tools of the opponent. You know, is Spence going to neutralize Crawford's tools or vice versa? We have to see what happens. And this is where I think it's a genuine 50-50, because Spence, being so fundamentally sound, he can take and capitalize the ambitious attacks on Terence Crawford. And for someone like Terence Crawford, he can capitalize, you know, on Spence's factor on not being able to fight so well on the back foot, or, you know, Spence as well. He's somebody who, you know, tends to just fight one style and fight one way. So can Terence bring out a tool that Spence has no answer to? Again, we would have to wait and see. But we're here for the prediction, so we do have to predict. But before I do so, I'm gonna actually have a look onto you know, the copy box stats, and if I have a look in terms of who does what best, Terence Crawford, his punches thrown per round is about 45 punches per round, and he lands about 15 of them, which the connection ratio tends to be about 34%. So it's solid. It's certainly solid. I think with Errol Spence, he throws about 70 punches per round. So you can imagine his work rate compared to Terence Crawford is a lot higher. Throws about 25 punches more than Terence Crawford in a round. Is that going to be a factor? Well, we will have to wait and see. But again, he connects about 30%. So though he throws more, he actually connects a lot less than Terence Crawford. And Terence Crawford throws 25 punches less. So that's huge. We have to remember that, and see what would happen tonight. You know, for someone to connect even less than Terence by 25 punches, well, let's see what happens. And the power punches, Terence Crawford throws about 10 power punches per round and lands about 47%. So half of them do connect. And then Errol Spence throws about 15 power punches per round, and he has about 45% land. So though half still connect, he is throwing a lot more and also connecting a lot less. So you can see, it seems like Spence works a lot harder to get his punches connected compared to Terence Crawford. As well, the opposition, that tends to land about 26% on Terence Crawford, whereas on Errol Spence, the opponents tend to connect about 27%. So it's slightly more on Errol compared to Terence. So it's close when it comes to the stats itself. It's very, very close. But look, we're here to come for the prediction to see what it's going to come down to, and I think it's going to come down to just minuscule margins. Honestly, I don't think it's going to be any of them two making a massive mistake in this fight in order to capitalize on it. Who knows? You never know. Someone might get desperate, but I don't see that happening. I think it's going to be the minuscule of margins to win this fight, because I think they're both such good fighters with such high IQ. I can't see them making such a massive mistake in this fight, especially with the fact that the fight is so big. I just can't see it happening. But I you know what, I would imagine both having a game plan. I think Terence Crawford, if there's a game plan that he would have, would be to take away Errol Spence's jab. I think if you take away Spence's jab, I do think we will have a different Spence, because that's what keeps him going. If that jab is not used and not used as frequently, I think Spence will be in trouble. So I'm curious to see how Terence is going to approach this fight, but I would imagine that would be a particular game plan in his team. And again, I think vice versa, if Spence has a game plan, I think is to stop Spence going into a rhythm. I think you will see the best Crawford when he has time and space to think. If you allow him to have So yeah, I think it's going to be a very difficult fight for both fighters. You know, this is probably one of the fighters that I'm struggling to lean towards any of the fighters, whether that be Errol or Crawford. There's so many what ifs in this fight. I think that's what just mind boggles me. You know, there's so many different ways that each fighter can win. So it's definitely one of the most, if not the genuine 50-50 fight. But look, as I mentioned, I think if there is one fighter that can take advantage of a minuscule mistake, it has to be Terence Crawford. He just has just a slight edge when it comes to his technical abilities. He just has that little bit more for me, I think, in his toolbox. There's just a little bit more that he has over Errol Spence. And I think he's going to take advantage over just a minuscule mistake, such as a overextended jab that Spence will throw that nobody would normally capitalize on, because it's such a small mistake that people might not see. But I think Terence is someone that can see those type of mistakes, and I think he will take advantage of that, maybe towards the 10th or 11th round, where, you know, he overextends and then he catches him with a counter hook over the top in the 10th or 11th round. So that's what I'm going for. That's my prediction. Terence Crawford to win by KO in the between 10 and 11. Boom. See you tonight. Yeah, I'm done.